It appears that we're live and such. Let's do the test. It appears that we're good, close enough. Yes, I've declared it so. Probably should move over a little bit. Be in the center of something. Anyway, so I thought just go over some of the stuff been working on just to give possible feedback on any of these kind of things. And not that there will be any, but figure what the hell. I'll try. My cheap writing paper. 20-year-old printer paper, perforations on it. Oh. Anyway, I guess it's 30 years old. Jeez, time. Oof. Time. Anyway, pen. Where's my pen? Some fucking cunt stole my pen. There's not that many people who could possibly have done that, so I must have done something with it. Something for which I have no idea what that would have been, though. Sorry, this is a terrible error in my function. Well, I'll have to just use red, I guess, because that's all I can find. It's the red pen. Oh, there's a pen. All right, well, that's a stupid thing to say. People use pens every day. There's one over here. I guess I could use this one. See if it writes. It does write well enough. All right, so we have the contest, which I think is kind of a big thing coming up, the Deadpool contest. And I do have that list, so I might as well put the list up since I have it. And, I did think of a name that was just glaringly missing today, which is, the hell, I don't need this window. I need this one. Yes, I need this thing. To move this one up. Okay. Thunderfoot was missing off the list. So if you think of any people who should be on the list, I guess I'll have to scroll the list, but I don't know. You can go to the Deadpool video, and the list should be in the description. I might not be the updated list, though. But anyway, if there's people you would suggest should be on the list, wouldn't be opposed to adding some. So anyway, the idea will be is I'll offer a $3,000 prize to, and you won't get the money for a little while. It's going to take a while for us to see if this happens. And, you just pick your people who will be reasonable first. The first ones to be reasonable, and who will be the last ones to be reasonable. And so that should be interesting, I think. So else I was thinking about other subjects. Contest. I put an S on there. Contest. Yeah. Like I said, I don't need to write anything on that. Anyway, so I was thinking about the fact that this whole dissident thing and how difficult it is for any of us to really get any kind of interest in the conversation. Very little participation, very little viewership for people attempting to have conversations about these kinds of specific, it's sort of a specific niche subject. And so I think that's good. I mean, that's an advantage, but it's obviously physics, so it's broad, in terms of there's a ton of elements to physics, from quantum mechanics to the relativity, and then you can subdivide those into all kinds of subjects. And so it breaks down in that sense. But you see, the ones that do work are the ones who are basically selling like the Electric Universe Club. I don't understand the whole Ken Wheeler popularity thing, but it is what it is. Because it's so, you don't even know what to call it. I mean, can't even label his metaphysics as something. Some kind of ether theory, surely, but, I don't know. Can't make it, you know, I can't even describe it, but obviously there's people who are somehow interested in some way. Again, still, I can't. Electric Universe is somewhat understandable because they have they make some arguments in videos that are a little bit coherent, and they're still pretty far from the truth. But the whole Dullard thing, Dullard was pretty popular for a while. I mean, I don't, you know, he doesn't get much views now, but he doesn't do much either. But yeah, it's just kind of dismal to be somebody willing to talk about physics, because it doesn't seem like anybody's willing to engage in these kinds of arguments about the concepts. And again, it is something that needs sort of to be a little bit structured. So there's no real debate, I guess, with the Electric Universe. They're just kind of, we just produce our religion videos, and there really isn't any conversation about it. So in a sense, it's not the same kind of thing as the other dissidents. And so the De Hilster group thing, the whatever, the Chappelle natural philosophy. And again, you know, even from the very beginning, I sort of had a problem with this idea of even calling something natural philosophy as opposed to what? You know, it just doesn't make any sense. Philosophy is supposed to be about the truth and not some sort of natural truth. I don't even know what that means. But anyway, so it's got a poor title. Number one, this John Chappelle guy isn't anybody knows. And so, you know, it's not exactly going to grab somebody's interest. It needs a kind of a more generic, functional name for this organization, Dissident Science Inc. or something. Yeah, the whole way they engage in attempting to say, well, there's got to be some boundaries, right? I mean, you're either making arguments against conventional physics, but you can't make them from everybody's individual point of view, arguing about their own theory. So I can sort of see, and like maybe I'll play some of the last week's their interaction, because it just becomes an argument where somebody presents their wacky idea and the other guy argues from his wacky position. So the arguments really should be from the conventional. They should all play devil's advocate and say, well, look, conventional physics has this evidence. They have this, this, and this. How have you overcome that evidence? How can you demonstrate that somehow they've not done the experiment or they've overlooked something? Can you demonstrate that? Can you make an argument for that before we can establish that you have any hope of saying, you know, you saw a UFO and somehow you have more evidence than merely saying, well, government radar wasn't on at the time because they were all eating lunch or something, you know, some kind of totally specious explanation for why it's possible that, you know, none of our detectors detected this UFO. I'm just trying to find a way of saying it analogistically. So I will scroll this list down a bit so you can see there's other people on it. So in that vein, I was thinking I would attempt to make in the future one of these rooms or something, and I'll have a, you know, I only have my subscribers to go based on, but maybe I'll just provide a list of some of these other dissidents and provide us whatever brief knowledge I have of the content they produce, and just to try to encourage people to, if they have any, you know, interest, to, you know, I mean, it all takes time, you know, to understand what somebody's arguing. You either have to read their papers, or you have to listen to their videos, or you have to, you know, you have to absorb it in some way. And I'd argue that some of this content is in forms that it's easier to absorb than others, but I mean, it all takes time. You have to make some investment. And the irony is, I don't think any of these people are anywhere near the right track. But again, if we don't do something to create interest in the conversation, it's not going to happen, you know, by people doing nothing. So the De Hilster guy is right in the sense that people have to have some motivation to do something, to try things, to make these conversations more valuable to more people. I mean, I see value in having the arguments. The problem with the D. Hilster guy is he doesn't have much tolerance for argument, and you know, isn't really willing to provide too much, straying from his agenda. Apparently, as he banned me from the conversation for no other reason than I wasn't at all convinced I was getting having an honest conversation, frankly, with some of these dissidents. The conversation seems to be layered in a bunch of dishonesty, conspiracy theories and whatnot. And I called them on their conspiracy theories. And somehow you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to say something. Well, you have any evidence for what you're saying? Any at all? You know? And that offended him, apparently. Which, like I said, is bad on him. It's not a decisive blow to his usefulness. I'm just saying that, you know, you can't be preaching out of both sides of your face, so to speak. You can't be complaining and then at the same time censoring the conversation, essentially censoring the process. So anyway, just this idea. So we need some kind of something, and viewers, perhaps the ones who view, are probably not going to be too useful in terms of providing suggestions for how we broaden these audiences, because they're here because they also find this kind of conversation useful in some way or another, or interesting. And clearly that's not what most people are doing. So somehow we have to try to broaden the value of the content. And I know that for some people would argue that for my videos, doing that would be stop saying certain words. So I am again acknowledge I must whatever, however you say, I must you know, I must properly port my potty mouth, and you know, it's true. I should. I don't like to say I must, just because that just sounds like it's a fact that I have to accept. I don't know if I want to totally accept that fact, because the very idea that we have to talk baby talk to each other really annoys the phooey out of me. It annoys the phooey out of me. You know, it shouldn't be that way. I mean, adults should be forced to be adults on planet Earth. Serious stuff going on every day, life, death, all kinds of things. People afraid of words are just too silly. Might be. But anyway, so we'll do some comments while we're here. Let me think if there's any other projects on the list. So we have the project of making this, I don't know what to call that even. So anyway, so we have the project of first providing at least an index of content. People who are actually making some would be a good idea, which is very few people are actually even making any. But I'd like to broaden the list any way I can. So anybody who knows of other physics channels where there's some kind of reasonable amount of physics going on, you know, something a little better than 20-year-old recorded lectures or something. Something a little bit, you know, something where you're capable of asking a question, having it answered by somebody rational or reasonable. In physics, we are not enemies. I don't know exactly what that means, but I think it's disagreement is disagreement. And I suppose what you have to sort of understand there, John, you might not have any child in this game, so to speak. You haven't given birth to your own little special theory. And so it really is different when you've actually given birth to one, and you know, you're a little protective, you know, when you have one of these theories that you gave birth to. You're defensive and protective of it. And so, yeah, it gets a little bit personal sometimes. So if if you call somebody's theory an idiot, it's like you're calling them an idiot, and so, if you say, oh, your theory's idiotic, well, you just basically told the guy whose theory it is, he's an idiot, a moron, so it gets personal, whether you like it or not, even if you're saying something polite, like, I can't fathom how you came up with that or something. Even that's a little bit more overtly offensive, but I'm just saying it's really hard not to start triggering, in this environment. How do you know I don't have? Well, I'm just saying you haven't. Obviously, if you did, I think you'd be showing pictures of them by now. Somewhere in this conversation by now, you would have flipped out your wallet and said, look at my kids. That's all I'm saying. If you had a horse in this race, you'd probably be saying, look at my horse. Can I enter my horse? Something like that. Maybe you do. Like I said, I'm just saying that you obviously don't have your kids on a channel somewhere or something because you're not pointing to it and saying, look, I have some really cool kids. Look at them. Here's my channel. You haven't done any of that, right? I mean, I think I went to your channel. I don't think there's any content, right? Not every comment is against you. I'm just say it's close enough to every. So, when it's close enough, then it's close enough. I mean, if I didn't have 673 accounts blocked, they'd all be against me, and all in some horrible personal way. So, I mean, that's not exactly correct, I don't think. I don't know if I want to open it in this. Well, I'll open it in this because that's what's here. So, let's see if John switched. John's okay. So he does got some loop-de-doo here. Let's see. We got some orbitals for electrons as his background image. But he has no videos of his own that I can see. Oh, Thunderfoot fan. Oh my God. I mean, it's a great video you have listed there, right? Seeing electrons with the naked eye, Is that really possible? Come on. I mean, obviously, all the photons come from the direction of an electron, but we can't possibly see an electron. Come on. I don't know who this other guy is. Jean D. Calamont. So, but it would probably be worth. This is actually a science. I don't recall exactly what this video was. I remember he spent a fortune on a high-speed camera, so it might have something to do with that. Because I don't remember the video off the top of my head. But 560,000 views, and Thunderfoot just says the same. I mean, his last video was just, I wasted 30 minutes of my life because he's saying 4 things in the video about the stupid funnel tunnel thing or whatever the fuck it is, the loop-de-ware, what the fucking thing's called, the stupid train in a tube thing. I mean, yeah, it's so fucking stupid on so many levels, but he just kept doing the same. He kept doing the same video over and over and over again, showing the same clips of, look, it's empty, there's no seats in it. Yeah, we all got that. Oh, there's no superstructure. It couldn't take 10 pounds of air pressure. It'll blow up anyway. It's obviously not a very good demo. It's a piece of crap. It's just something superficially that looks like a train, but it isn't one. Doesn't have an engine, doesn't have seats, doesn't have any superstructure to hold it together. It's just a piece of crap. Yeah, we all got that. You have to tell me 10 times in the same video? I mean, come on, it's pitiful. But anyway, so, oh, you can't see this. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you can't see. It's only 2 videos in his liked videos category. So he doesn't like stuff very often either, which is funny. Yeah, he's hard to please. Boy, very hard to please. I don't like too many videos ever either, so I can't say I'm a big liker of videos, because I'm really not. But that's only because nobody makes any videos that are worth liking. I mean, it's just true, unfortunately. All right, probably should make that text smaller. Yeah, there are some things I could do with this software, make it a little bit better, but it's just such a little bit of a hassle to do all this, superficial, cosmetic, improving crap. It should be a little better, right? Let me see. That's a little better. Okay. So anyway, so yeah, the downgrade. So he did make a funny joke here, very nice Ken Wheeler joke about dreaming. So I'm not going to read it to you because it's whatever. Jokes are fine. I'm just not So I'm not here to do parodies or to be. Well, I sort of am here to do it, but I don't need to do any extra of that. That's sort of off the subject. So Gloria, whatever. Good work. Should magnetism be able to affect the pattern? So this is about the two slit apparently. Well, the problem is no force can affect a photon would be my argument. So gravity doesn't do it and none of the other forces do it. And that's clear. So the force itself won't be able to do it. The question is, will the force affect electrons or something else? And that's another question where I think it's really just about transitions. So every time you transition from one substance to another substance to another substance, that layer between the two material substances, I think, is a very interesting layer. And that comes up in optics a lot with, what do they call it? Thin film and such. So when you create transitions, you create opportunity for all kinds of shenanigans. Is there any way we can remove the pattern by ensuring that there are no electrons in the slit? Yes, we can't really unelectron an atom. And that's sort of what I'm arguing here, is that the exterior atoms are very interesting. And this is coming up in Charge a lot. So the last couple of Professor Lewin videos, it's come to my realization, obviously, that I really wasn't paying enough attention to surfaces, and surfaces is where all the action is. Because, surfaces don't, an atom is essentially bound only by one side on a surface, right? So, I mean, the plastic atoms on the top layer of this or on the side, they're connected to other plastic atoms, on this side, but they're not connected on this side. So they always have to have some kind of exposed surface. And that exposed surface is likely to be covered with ions and weird stuff and shit and whatnot. So it's a very interesting layer, the surfaces. And when you put two of them together, you have even more interesting combinations and all kinds of room for interesting effects. Oh, this fucking monitor is going to make me crazy. I killed the button, so it should be not doing this anymore. Sorry. Nasty poop head monitor. All right. So then next comments. I once commented that he could build a device to demonstrate these principles. So I don't know what principles he's talking about. It's a talk physics video. I don't know. I'm not going to the video to find out what video it is. Later there was no deeply. No deeply. I guess he means reply. I just don't know. If you have something to say, say it. If you have some point to make, raise it. Post a link or something. But this vacuous nonsense about, you demonstrated something or you offered some sort of reasonable or helpful advice is just a horse shit. So yes, I'm just deleting that nonsense because it didn't happen. Maybe you're talking about somebody else. I can't tell from the comment. Maybe you're saying, I told Ken Wheeler he could do this and he didn't reply. Well, then you have to be a little more explicit because I can't tell what you're saying. All right. Very good video maker. Oh, that's the joke I made. Yes, because the thing fell down 3 times and I made the joke. See, some people might not know that's a reference to an old movie reference to a movie called, I don't know, The World According to Garp. No, so it was Jason, no, whatever his name was. I don't know, it's about an idiot savant. And, he'd always say, I'm a very good driver. And probably he wasn't a very good driver. It was freaking retarded. But anyway, after the thing fell over for the 3rd time, actually, you are a very good video maker. Well, yes, I mean, obviously, I am to some extent, and that's a little bit humorous of me to say that, so blah, blah, blah. So in some sense, I'm adequate video maker. But I wouldn't say good. I wouldn't say very good. All right, this video opened my eyes about him. So this is a Ken Wheeler comment. And it's the video where Ken is just swinging a magnet into the big hunk of copper. There wasn't that much wrong with that video in the sense he's just demonstrating the eddy currents that he denies existing. So he doesn't even make a statement about why it's happening, I don't think. I don't recall him making any statement about why it was happening. He just kept trying to make it happen, you know, where the magnet would stop. And, you know, you could clearly see how much dampening a big hunk of copper can cause. So, yeah. But I don't know how that opened your eyes. His other videos are much more deceptive. What he says is going on in a ferrocell. Those are the videos that should open your eyes when he starts talking about how the magnetism is bending the light. That one should make you a little bit scared. All right, and this is the simulation guy. Thanks. Yes, I appreciate. I did read your comment. I do understand. Yes, 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 and of course, and whatever. Okay, so we're done with that stuff and such. So moving on to the next thing. Oh, we have some more comments. Yay. Let's see. Not every comment is against you. Well, close enough. I am working on a set of videos. Oh, good. Last week you blocked the guy that was shaking his head back and forth. But that means yes. I don't know what that means, but whatever. I block people because they're not doing what they need to do here, which is if they're going to comment, please make it something connected, rational. And if it's not, I'm just saying they're overtly wasting my time. I'm just saying, you know, overt wasting of my time. Why should I take that as anything but an insult? Let's see. I wish I could stay and chat. I have to take practice physics GRE, though. I have to take... Okay, so he's got some physics test he has to take. Good. Okay. Well, I might be a good prep... whatever they call those things, but it's okay. Go ahead, toddle off, do something else. Understood. Let's see, where else? Yeah, so I could probably play some of the NPCSE thing or whatever. So I haven't finished watching it. So the guy did propose a theory that's, you know, on the surface I'd say yes, he's starting to get it. You know, it's the idea of gravity being just a form of electromagnetic radiation. But he completely fails because he falls for the notion that somehow gravity is, you know, bends light and all of that crap, which means you're saying the forces interact with the forces, and then all of that stuff can't work. I mean, all the superposition stuff can't work anymore. So, you know, just the Professor Lewin videos had a lot of superposition in them lately. You know, just the idea that the forces act independently, and all that couldn't happen if forces interacted with forces. If light is bent by gravity, then technically superposition can't work if gravity is a form of radiation. So, so you shouldn't fall for that fella, I guess I would say. And then he has some notion that the speed of light is variable, which is, again, just kind of a non-starter. It's, we would have been able to detect that by now. So that's kind of a loser. But, you know, the Franklin Hu guy, who, you know, like I said, I used to sort of like, he just wants to argue from his position. So he keeps trying to tell the guy, no, you have to bend your theory to fit in mine, you know, and so unless you fit my facts, I'm going to kind of pretend your facts can't be true. And it's just, yeah, it's pointless to argue from those positions. It's not the guy's obligation to explain why Franklin's wrong. And Franklin shouldn't be pretending that the guy has some obligation to explain why his theory doesn't fit into Franklin's view. You always have to talk from the established, accepted theory. That's your first target. First, you have to defeat them. Then you can worry about defeating all these other loop-de-doers, which I would argue is going to be pretty easy once you've taken down the giant. Taking down the less than giant is going to be fairly easy. All right, is there anything else to do here? Part of me says I guess not. So we will migrate back to the video. I'll have to resize this again. The videos will be the wrong size, I believe, anyway. Was probably something else I could get to, but I don't know. Let's see. What else is here? It's interesting. I don't think there's anything in the subscriptions to comment on. I'm pretty sure. Won't be anything new or interesting. Nope. Yeah, the Sean Carroll interviews have just been on all kinds of shitty, stupid subjects that I couldn't give a shit about. So it's just absolutely, I have just absolutely no interest in all of this other shit. So it's only two subjects that matter. Conversations about the value of existence and physics. Everything else is just a waste of time. According to me. So that should be on the screen now. Let's see. Yeah, that looks like that. So it's working. All right. So maybe we'll play some of this. I thought there was something else I was thinking of doing. Let's see if I got all my things done here. Okay, we got the contest. Need to make a list of channels worth at least keeping track of, being subscribed to, in terms of content critical of the established theory, or even channels where they're not critical, but they will engage dissidents, the debunkers. So, but there's very few who debunk anything but the lowest of hanging fruit. And what other? There's some other thing I was going to do. Do want to do some charge experiments. I was thinking about lightning, and yes, it's kind of dangerous doing lightning experiments. But I was thinking the idea that the clouds are going, they're say positively charged on their bottom, and they come floating by. And the idea is the Earth goes negative, but the Earth really is grounded so well, that only a tiny bit of it can go negative, you could argue. But let's just say it does. Well, what if I made a lightning rod that was like 3 million volts negative, and I separated it from ground? Wouldn't that be even more negative, theoretically? Or would, as the clouds go by, would it really be true that the lightning rod would end up the same charge as the ground? So I was just in thinking about that. I was thinking you should be able to create something that's even more likely to get hit by lightning. And of course, once you get hit by lightning, the idea would be to try to store the lightning. So, first you need to be reliably hit by it. And if you can get reliably hit by it, then you just have to figure out a way to store it somewhere, which is, of course, a huge thing to figure out. But I was thinking about different ways of making giant capacitors, and that's what you really need. So what you need to do is create surfaces. See, that's, again, where surface density is everything. You want to make a lot of charge. The way to make a lot of charge is to make a lot of surface to put it on. And that's why capacitors kind of work, is because it's a lot of surface rolled up in that little capacitor. So the idea really is to create surface. As much surface as you can create, the cheapest you can create it. So you need a cheap material. And I'm just thinking there should be some way to make that out of land, to make that out of the ground itself, to make a capacitor that would hold a huge amount of voltage. It really should be doable. You just have to think of how to make it do, how to do it. That's another thing to work on, but that's a little different than this project. So there's so many, and I was thinking about a parabolic dish. I have a bowl, metal bowl. I even have a copper one. And I was thinking if you charge that, that technically the charge should be a little bit focused, and to some extent it should create some effects like that, because it is a surface phenomenon. It is coming off parallel to the surface, and so you would think that you could make a pretty heavy density of charge, a little charge beam of some kind. but you know, all stuff to work on. But those, like I said, those are the different category of projects. Besides the projects of trying to find some way to get this conversation more broadly appreciated, and you know, more participants. Yeah, see, the Particle Guru is on my list of, you know, videos. I mean, you know, he's an older guy, but he does make a lot of videos where he's talking about how something works, and he's not necessarily saying I have every answer for it, but this is the dilemma, or this is the circumstance, and their answer doesn't seem too good, and maybe I don't have a perfect answer, but that's the kind of, that to me is very productive conversation to have, is to point out that there's all these phenomena for which there's very little explanation for the actual mechanical process. What is actually mechanically happening? You know, what are the atoms doing, and in what order are they doing it to get to this, the end result of the phenomenon? Let's see, is he on your list? Yes, he is on my list. Bill the Hillster. Anyway, obviously David's father. Anyway, so let's play a little of this.
Electromagnetism as a push and pull kind of thing, then you would have to accept that.
Okay, so the Franklin Hu guy, like I said, the more he talks about his theory, the more I say, oh, what a pile of crap. Okay, so his idea is that gravity and light is a push-pull. So it's that kind of wave where it pushes and goes back and forth. So everything is like AC waves. And I just don't see how you make any sense out of that, how gravity is push-pulling. Clearly, when somebody's in free fall, they're not push-pulling. You get a sense of it when you're on the ground, but obviously when you're on the ground, you can see why you're being pushed back up is because you're pushed into the ground. The ground's fighting back. So I just don't, that doesn't make any sense.
That can never actually exert a net force on anything.
I'm sorry, your concept of a push and pull?
Yes.
Okay, so now I guess they're going to, I haven't listened to this. Like I said, it sounds like they're going to get ready to have an argument. This Franklin's being a bit obnoxious. Like I said, he's arguing some other guy's theory based on the fact that it doesn't fit his theory. It's just, you can't do that. I mean, you can't do that without saying that's what we're going to do. We're going to compare my theory to your theory. We're not going to compare the theories to conventional physics. We're going to compare them to each other, which there's not much reward in the guy defeating your theory. It doesn't get him very far. Hey, I defeated Franklin Hu's theory. That's not going to get him anywhere.
I view electromagnetic radiation as a beam going in one direction.
Yes. So he's got it to the idea of rays. So he's got that part right. But again, he's breaking the speed of light, which is just idiotic in my opinion. And he's got this notion that somehow the gravity electromagnetic rays are capable of bending the light electromagnetic rays. Like somehow you could bend microwaves with a laser beam, or you could break gamma rays with a radio wave. You could bend them. Absolutely no evidence of any electromagnetic radiation ever bending any other electromagnetic radiation. So that just isn't going. It's like a non-starter for me.
And that's still perfectly consistent with it being a push and a pull.
It's a push.
I mean, when I talk and I send the sound waves across the room.
Yeah, Franklin doesn't have a lot of, there's some things, that big gaps in his knowledge that I didn't realize he had. He said something like, well, you can't shoot a laser at a tennis ball and make it move, implying that light didn't have any momentum, when clearly they've already demonstrated it does. I mean, they have done that where they've shot at laser beams at little wooden boats and made them move. So the force of the laser beam has been demonstrated, but clearly you could get it just from the fact that they light matches and they can burn holes. Clearly it has momentum, so it's kind of silly.
Is that a push?
Yeah, when it hits somebody's ear, it's a push.
No, actually it's not. The reason why they're doing it is...
Okay, so he says actually it's not. When clearly the change in pressure is, part of it's a push. there's very little possibility, I think, that we could talk just by unpressurizing the air, you know. But either way would work. I mean, it's just a recognition of a difference. You're creating a difference in something, and your ear is going to pick up the difference. But to say, again, why would anybody, this analogy stops. I mean, light isn't frickin' sound. Doesn't move like sound. Make a sound laser beam. You know, show me a ray of sound traveling somewhere. Show me sound traveling to the moon.
Pushing and pulling your eardrum, that's what causes you to hear. It's not, there's no net force. When I talk at someone, if I have a really loud loudspeaker and I pointed at something, you won't see any net force on that object. Do you understand that? Right?
So again, he's talking patronizingly as if he's has a whole list of facts where he's demonstrated that somehow when I'm making sound, I'm doing anything other than creating high pressure, and pressure that every part of what I'm doing is above normal pressure, that there is no below normal pressure. So no part of the wave is negative. It's clearly an all positive. So I'm just either pushing hard or pushing soft, but I'm always pushing. So sound, in a sense, is always pushing. It's either pushing hard or pushing soft.
Yeah,
No,
well,
it's not a plus.
okay, but I'm saying that electromagnetic radiation flows and ultimately, therefore, pushes.
No, you have to explain. You can't say that. You can't postulate that. That doesn't.
Yes, of course he can. So again, it's just idiotic to say he can't postulate that. Of course he can, and your obligation is to explain why that theory of a momentum gravity, one that gets absorbed by the things it hits, isn't accurate, when it certainly can make sense about why gravity is proportional. The more matter you have, the more stuff to hit, the more it gets hit, the more, you know, it's just a matter of, if you have a lot of mass, you'll absorb a lot of energy. Gravity will work a lot harder to make you move the same speed, because the pressure of the force is the same, and it's really just affecting atoms.
Follow. I don't think.
I mean, the stuff in the atoms.
Unless someone else would like to disagree with me, and this is a discussion, so.
Yes, I disagree with you. And again, you should really have the discussion, not in the context where every individual in the discussion says, well, my theory says, and then the other guy says, well, my theory says, and then my theory says, and this is why your theory is wrong, is because my theory says something different. You have to argue evidence. So I guess that's what they should do, is just argue evidence.
I'm just trying to keep the discussion going, guys.
You know, what experiment shows what? And that's where it'll all fail as a conversation, because people will bring up experiments that have no value, like the Eddington experiment.
So I expect you to, come up in here anytime. You disagree with something I'm saying, or you want to agree with something that Paul's saying, that's what we're here for.
Right, but your disagreement should be based on what does the evidence demonstrate. So again, arguing from all this theoretical stuff without ever arguing any material evidence is also what leaves this a little wanting, lacking, undercooked. I have to put this on, I have to make this always on top window, yes. Robert, Bob, okay, Bill, Bob, whatever. You may learn, if you stick around for a while, that I pay no attention to names. And I will make a mess of them all over the place. So unless I know somebody for like 10 years, I might get their name wrong. So you might be Joe Gray. You might be Jim White. You know, who knows what you'll turn into till I get it stuck in my head. It's just a detail I've never been able to. Names have always just, people say it right to my face. Hi, I'm Jim blah blah. And it turns into nothing. No retention. Zero. Phoenix theory looks stuck. Well, that's not very helpful, but whatever. I don't know what Phoenix theory is off the top of my head, but it doesn't sound good. You know, oh, the universe burned up and then the ashes turned into a flying bird thingy. Well, flying bird isn't that unusual, but one that was ashes is.
But do you understand my argument here that if what you were saying is true, then if I put a gigantic speaker in front of a ball, it should be able to push it away.
Yes, of course, and you can. You haven't. You think you can't push something with sound waves? Hello, jeez, you haven't been to too many concerts, have you? I mean, they sometimes, you actually feel your, the G forces.
I think the observation is that all a ball does is just vibrates.
Well, it only vibrates if you don't give it momentum. So obviously you have to do it in a circumstance where obviously it's going to get eaten up by friction. But for example, a piece of paper or something, you'll see it. It'll go back and it won't get sucked back the other way. It'll fall back and push, fall back, push, fall back. So if you put it on a sail on a little boat, you'll see that the boat will go. Okay, so if you do something to get rid of the friction and keep it parallel, you'll see that you can put the speaker here and the boat will go across the water. I mean, that's a huge gap in his knowledge base, not to understand that especially something like sound, that sound is a pressure wave and that it will push things. I mean, that's like not understanding that water waves from the ocean, if they hit you, will push you. Of course they will.
Okay, you're trying to talk. It's barely. I can barely hear you. You have to speak up. Who is this?
My microphone not working?
It is, but it's very quiet. If you can get closer to it, that would be better.
Closer ain't gonna work. He's got something else wrong with his mic.
Cornelius?
Is this any better?
No.
It's okay. Go ahead.
I'm just not sure whether or not I'm using my phone outdoors and that, so I'm not sure how well I can hear it. But what Paul is saying is basically it's about the beam. It's probably not exactly what I would look at it. But even if you look at it as your wave, Franklin, when you're speaking, the wave spreads out and the sound gets weaker as it goes. So the relative strength of each successive wave.
Well, whatever. That's not what this other guy's arguing. I mean, actually, his argument's good in the sense that he's saying, look, when the force goes through the Earth, it heats it. So he's using the heat argument. It's not really heating it. It's pressurizing it, and the pressure is creating the heat. So the heat's a symptom of the pressure of moving, actually physically moving the matter. And it's moving some matter this way, and it's moving matter this way, it's moving matter this way, it's moving matter this way, and so that's why it heats up. But the idea that there's energy being absorbed and that the force that gets through is weaker. So he's saying something like radio waves, long wave radio waves go into the Earth, and they're converted into microwaves coming out or something, or infrared or some other kind of crap. But clearly that kind of conversion isn't really the substance of the gravity. The gravity is the absorption of the energy. It doesn't really matter which way the energy comes out, as the magnet sort of shows. The magnet's still affected by gravity just like every other object. It doesn't change its gravity any, because once it converts something, it's not going to get hit by what it converted. So it's not going to have to smell its own farts. It's gone. So it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is how much of the force did it absorb. And once it's absorbed some of the force, that means something else can't get hit by that force. Whether it's converted in some other energy or not is irrelevant. The point is the force doesn't get through. It gets eaten, so to speak, by the movement. And it's doing this while it should be out here pushing. So again, as I've stated, what makes me stick to the ground is the fact that somebody on the other side of the Earth is absorbing momentum by being accelerated, and the force that gave him that momentum ain't getting to me because he's moving and using it. So it doesn't get here. So the gravity here pushes me down because I have an imbalance. There should be more hitting me from the bottom, and all those assholes down there are sucking it up, so I can't get free. And vice versa. All right, Kenneth Griggs. Well, we'll look that one up. Thank you. Appreciate it. We won't do it this second, but soon. I mean, let me grab it as a search word. I hope his channel is got the word Kenneth Griggs in it somewhere.
From the source, which is your mouth, is decreasing. And where the wave strength is strongest is actually the differences in the wave pressure, the wave strength, even the push and pull wave strength, is what makes things attract towards the source.
Yes, but all that falls apart when you're talking about a force coming from all directions, because then it's going to be equal no matter where you go. There's the same amount of it. There's not extra gravity over there and more gravity over there and more gravity. There's no place you go where you get extra. You can't move. Gravity doesn't work by the inverse square law in the sense that the force itself isn't inverse square. It's only inverse square in terms of that once you've affected it. The effect is inverse square, not the gravity itself. The filtered version, the part you use up, makes the inverse square law.
So if the wave were to be a parallel wave all the way from your mouth outwards, it would be one thing because the strength of each successive wave front would be the same. But if the wave is spread...
Yes, well, obviously that doesn't even make any sense, so there's no point in even having that argument because we know no force does that. I mean, then it would just be single rays, and each single ray would mean something. See, this came up before, too, and when the guy's describing how gravity is infinite or this is infinite. As a practical matter, it's really not, because there's a point where it's like light. If I go a certain distance away from a light bulb, like if I put a light bulb on Pluto and I'm sitting here on the Earth, the fact is the photons coming from that light bulb on Pluto are now so far apart, that is, they've diverged, right, coming from Pluto, and that divergence is so wide now that the truth is I can be not getting any light at all. I can be right in between two rays. A ray can be going over here and a ray can be going over here, and I will get absolutely zero effect from that bulb. So there's no inverse square law. So as long as I'm in between two rays, you could just go forever and you'll never know there was a light bulb there. I mean, obviously the light is very close together, so you have to go a very far distance before the divergence starts adding up to something really significant. But clearly at the distance from us to Pluto, that's a pretty significant distance. And when you're talking about us to a star a billion light years away, or us to something further, there's a point, like I said, where the odds of you getting hit by a photon get thinner and thinner and thinner. And there's a point where you're just not realistically going to get hit. You might get hit with one today, and you won't get hit by one tomorrow. So it's a real time equation. So you could go a whole day where you're saying there's no inverse square law because I'm not getting anything. And you have to wait a whole day before you get your inverse square law portion. So it gets to be kind of a trick question. Because in a sense, you can be in places where there'll be no evidence that the thing even exists, let alone has an inverse square energy function.
And the strength of each successive wavefront is actually reduced. You can even look at it from a Bernoulli's principle standpoint. If you're looking at air like your sound situation, as the wave spreads, the particles of matter in each successive wavefront farther away from your voice are moving at a slower speed or vibrating outwards and inwards towards you and away from you. As
again, these comparisons do fall apart. Yes, moving material, vibrating atoms is a lot different than a ray of light. I mean, first I'd say a ray of light isn't traveling in a medium, quite obviously. So that comparison right there pisses me off because there's no fucking ether. There's no need for it. The bullets of light do not diminish in speed because they're not traveling through a medium. They're not plowing through anything. They're not perturbating through anything. But yes, sound does degrade with distance because it's doing physical work. The photon isn't doing any physical work until it hits something.
Slower speed, the farther away you get, because they're a weaker sound. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense, but I don't know how it has anything to do with producing a net force.
Okay, well, let's just keep on going here.
Yeah, well, the net force is how much of it's absorbed. So again, no, just ignore the point of the argument is if you have some impediment in the way of that wave, then some portion of the force is going to be absorbed by that impediment. But if the impediment's semi-transparent and just is delaying the force or doing something else, you can recognize that delay and you'll see it as a phase shift, or you'll see it as something as obvious as it's 50% weaker where that object is. It has 50% less amplitude.
Now let's deal with what Bernoulli's principle says about velocity of particles. Now this is not equated to gravity, but this is equated basically to just generally waves moving out from a source or inwards to a source. If you look at Bernoulli's principle says that the pressure is lower the higher the velocity. Is that correct?
Sure.
Which is, again, just, you could bring up Huygens. Again, something that just doesn't have any basis in reality. You know, no evidence for this principle. So, yeah, no, I don't agree. Anyway, all that is part if. Wow, you're really outdoing yourself with that comment.
Okay. Okay, now where is the...
I forgot the is. All that is part if. Yeah, two is's. Brilliant.
The higher velocity is where? We were just discussing. It doesn't say which direction the velocity is because the pressure is measured perpendicular to the velocity of the moving media. Is that correct?
Which would be idiotic. Why would you measure the pressure of something perpendicular? You know, obviously the pressure is going to build up in front, logically. Oh, here we go. All that is particles and the void. Fine, but I don't even need to call it a void. I mean, there's just no whatever. Okay, fine. As long as void is void. I mean, look, we had a word like space and they turned that into a something. So you can't even say void without somebody saying, well, you mean ether, right? What is the void exactly? Well, I don't have any problem with it. I mean, I don't know why everybody has a problem imagining nothing. Why is nothing so damn fucking, so damn phooey, so darn phooey complicated? I mean, what exactly is your problem, people? I mean, you can't imagine nothing, the simplest thing you could possibly make, and you can't imagine it? You always have to make this nothing into something? Oh, damn. Infinite empty space, question mark? It's nothing. It can't be infinite or finite because it's nothing. Nothing can't have a property. That's the only property it has is nothing. And it's very proud of that. I only do nothing. I don't do any of this word bullshit. Except for the word nothing. That's the only one I do. But is space something? Well, if it's something, then it's not nothing. Then what the fuck's the point of having words like void when it doesn't mean void? Nothing doesn't mean nothing. If I say it's the nothing, it doesn't mean it's the nothing. It's some kind of evil something coming to get me. Like in the movies. I mean, what a pile of crap. Sorry, that's crap.
Well, there's no moving media here. I mean, we have a media that got waves going at the velocity is zero, effectively.
It's moving. It is moving.
It's not moving, no.
Just a minute. Didn't we just discuss that? We said the particles of the air within the sound wave are moving outwards and inwards.
All right. I mean, people just can't stay on a rational subject ever, right? I mean, it's just so goddamn irritating. It's so goddarn. It's so gump darn irritating that you just can't play with anything without just always perverting it into some sort of fucking friggin' unicorn conversation. Does nothing have an end? I mean, it's just stupid. I just pointed out how it doesn't do anything. Has no properties, has no substance, nothing. Nothing is nothing. It does nothing. The photon can go 13 billion years across the universe because it's mostly going through nothing. I hate this. John, right. How far apart could two particles be? Limitless? So just more, let's pretend that the turtle wins the race because, because the turtle is moving twice as far in infinity terms, because half the distance is half the distance is half the distance is half the distance, and he's gone 5 times more than half the distance, and therefore he won the race, even though no, he lost it, because we're going to get lost in the infinity that we're pretending. There's an infinity in this paper right here. Right here is an infinity, and there's another infinity over here. So this paper is really infinitely long. I mean, I just have no patience for this. So if that's what you're going to do in this comment section, then I'm going to just block you. So if you keep having conversations about your stupid infinities and your stupid nothing is somethings, then just fuck the fuck off. You're at the wrong goddamn channel for goddamn sure. This is baby talk. Preposterous word game drivel.
Is that not motion?
Yes, it's a very small motion over a very small
Okay,
distance.
all right, very small motion. It's motion with velocity, and it's motion with the relative velocity being higher towards the sound source than it is when you get farther away, because the sound.
No, that would be completely wrong. I mean, the velocity and the motion.
It's not completely wrong. It's completely right. Sound does slow down with distance. Light doesn't.
Is identical.
Wait. Why is that?
No matter how far away you are. If I'm playing my violin and I'm playing an A string,
No, we're not talking about the tone. Just a minute. Wait a minute. You just.
Yes, we are, because that's the frequency, and the frequency also degrades. So these people don't even know just even common physics. And here they are arguing about what photons are doing by comparing them to sound, and they don't even understand sound experiments.
Said the particles of sound of air closer to your mouth are moving outwards and inwards faster than the particles of sound and
well, they're really not moving outwards and inwards, so that's really not happening. It's all at exit pressure. Okay, it's all no. Your vocal cords aren't, unless you breathe in while you talk, which most people don't do. It's all going out your vocal cords. All right, your vocal cords are vibrating, and the vibrations that matter are the spring back ones. Spring back ones. You push them and they spring back this way. All right, so that part would be a reduction in pressure, but it's only after you increase the pressure. The point is they're all sonic booms anyway. See, I don't even want to get into the subject, because then I'll just start talking about sound. Sound is only produced when you move something faster than the speed of sound. Okay, those are the sounds you hear. You can't hear sound if it moves too slow. It doesn't break the sound barrier. But if I move it fast enough, it does, and it'll make a sound. And that's proven by the tip of the whip cracking. The entire crack sound is just because there's a little sonic boom when you move the tip, that little extra bit. That when you fold the rope over, you create a pulley thing, whatever you call that, a lever. And then you snap the whip, it's going extra speed. It's going twice as fast as the rope you're pulling. And that twice the acceleration means it goes faster than the speed of sound, and it creates a bang. And that's what your vocal cords are doing, is creating little tiny sonic booms. Anyway, I don't get into this. Like I have a choice. They're going to just keep making these comparisons. They really shouldn't make comparisons between light and sound. It's a mistake. One's in a medium, one's not. So they ought to just say, the preface ought to be, okay, we're all ether people, and we're only going to discuss physics in terms of empty space being full of jello that vibrates. So we're just going to talk about stuff vibrating. So there isn't any real stuff. There's just stuff vibrating, and vibrations bump into vibrations and all that nonsense. That can't possibly be right.
Because sound wave itself, the intensity of that sound, each individual sound wave is weaker. It's weaker and it's moving slower. Each in and out of each particle not the entire wave, but each particle that the wave consists of is moving slower out and in because it has to move a shorter distance because it's not as compressed. So the particles away from you are moving slower because the sound is weaker. If the particles are moving slower, now we have to take Bernoulli's principle into account. Okay, are you following me so far that the particles definitely are?
No, I can follow that, because what we're talking about here is amplitude. So we're talking about the actual shift back and forward. So when it's louder, you might have a shift of like 5 inches, but in order for it to be quieter, it might decrease a distance of 3, but it still has to do that in the same.
You can't do that. The frequency has to remain somewhat consistent, so you can't change this distance. Whatever. It's just degrading.
In time, in order to maintain frequency, so therefore, that when it's shifting only 3 inches, then it might actually be going a little bit slower physically, the back and forth.
Perfect. What you said is just exactly right. It might only move 3 inches.
It's dampened with distance. It's all you're really talking about. You're just saying that in the real world, between molecules, atoms, when they're banging into each other, there is some friction. The pool balls bouncing into each other over time degrade the impact because there is little bits of heat and little bits of other crap that are caused through the movement of the molecules. So over time you lose because you're crashing atoms into atoms. They're not purely kinetic.
Farther away from you, and it might move 5 inches right next to you. Guess what? That's happening in the same amount of time, 3 inches versus 5 inches. That means the velocity farther away is lower. The average velocity is lower. 100%. Can't argue with that, can you?
No, that's fine.
All right, good. We're there. We're on bike. All right.
Yeah, so now they're going to apply that to photons, which is just retarded.
If the velocity is lower, okay? Pressure.
Big Bang Theory is the problem. What problem does it create? What does it have to do with quantum mechanics? Oh, absolutely nothing. What does it have to do with the theory of relativity? Oh, that's right, absolutely nothing. Big Bang is incredibly irrelevant. If they change the theory tomorrow to the Big Suck or the Nothing Poofty or the whatever, let's say the hyperboloid unfolding, no matter what they turned it into, it wouldn't matter. It's irrelevant to understanding physics. The only universe that exists is the small one. That's it. There's no other universe. There's one universe, and it starts there. Oh, damn.
Pressure is higher. The perpendicular pressure to that wave is higher. If you forget about the wave theory momentarily, if you take an air velocity and you measure the pressure perpendicular to the motion of that air, if the air is sped up, the velocity decreases. If the air is sped up, the pressure decreases. Bernoulli's principle, correct?
Again, more bullshit. So just why are they? Well, there's no point. I mean, why are they having a conversation about electromagnetic radiation by comparing it to, I don't know, seeds floating through the air?
That would only be applicable to large moving streams of medium. I'm not sure it has applicability to these oscillating systems.
Right. Okay. I told you at the very beginning we're talking about generally moving waves and relative pressure. We're not talking specifically about gravity yet because we've got a long ways to go.
Yeah, this is just so pointless. All right, I'll play a little bit more and just say the hell with it. Yeah, I mean, it's just these ether nuts.
Get to where Duncan is at. Okay, but we're talking sound waves. You brought up sound waves. You brought up sound waves from your voice, and I'm just expounding on that and how that can demonstrate that the pressure farther away from you is greater than the pressure next to you, because the velocity of the particles moving back and forth away from you and towards you is higher near you than it is 10 feet away from you.
I mean, what kind of pressure are you talking about? You're certainly not referring to air pressure.
What's that?
What kind of pressure are you referring to?
Of course, he's talking about air pressure. Air pressure is what moves your eardrum back and forth. So quite obviously, there's less pressure the further away you go. Duh.
referring to?
I'm referring to air pressure.
Because definitely the air pressure, I mean, if I have a gigantic speaker and I measure the air pressure, and then I measure the air pressure like 100 feet away, I would say that the net pressure should be exactly the same. It's not.
Well, I'd say you're just insane. I don't know how you could think that the fact that the speaker is moving, you can't understand that that's obviously going to pressurize the air it has to push. Just like when you push water, you create more pressure in the water, and that's why it makes a wave as you're smashing the water into a smaller space. Well, you can't pressurize water, right? So, but you obviously can pressurize air. So the water pressure is a lot harder to pressurize. Water doesn't pressurize. The whole medium has to, let's see, how do you even say that correctly, right? I mean, you can't compress water as a fluid. You can compress air as a substance. So there's a clear difference between the two. And it's the difference that really makes all the difference of why you can't, you can't have these low frequency waves. You can't communicate through water very well. You can't. You get a lot of distortion because you can't pressurize the medium in the same way. Let me think how water pressure. I mean, obviously, when you go deeper underwater, there's more water pressure. But the water pressure is because the molecules are all tied to each other and you're feeling the weight of the water. Let's see how to say that. The weight of all their gravitational acceleration. So I guess that's the way to say it. You're really feeling the weight of each individual atom of the water above you being accelerated towards you. So each one of them is being accelerated towards you, and that's the weight you feel. No, so there's more to it. I mean, it sounds right, but it's wrong. Yeah, it sounds right, but it's wrong. No, it's yes, there's more gravity above you than there's more uncompensated for gravity above you than the amount of mass below you, which has lowered your gravity. So you're being pushed less down as you're lower. And it's still just the water weight. So it's just the weight of the water being gravitationally pulled down on top of you, the atoms above you. So it's just those atoms that are pushing down on you. So anyway, so it's not really water pressure. It's gravitational pressure. Where in atmosphere, sound is being created by air pressure. Pressurized atoms compressed. Waves of atoms that are pushed together.
Going to be a higher pressure speaker or lower pressure next to the speaker. It's going to be the same pressure 1 foot away.
No, it isn't.
Versus 100 feet away, versus 1,000 feet away, versus 1,000,000 feet away. It's going to be the same.
No, you have to measure it right. It's obviously a subtle difference in the pressure, but clearly that's exactly what our ears are capable of picking up. And obviously they're frequency sensitive. So it's only certain changes in pressure at certain frequencies that it can detect. But they are real differences in the pressures. The air pressure is pushing the eardrum. There's not some magical force pushing the eardrum. It's the air pressure. Oh, the who vid is bull. So you're really just not saying much. So who's the who vid? I don't know what that means. There's no who vid here. So you're saying Franklin who this video is bull. Well, it's this conversation between a guy who has a theory and Franklin who's theory and their discussion. So I don't know what part, I mean, obviously I don't agree with either one of them, but I don't know what the bull means. But whatever, fine. It's just not another useful statement. It's just, I wish you people were a little bit more articulate.
And you would be wrong.
No, I think that would be right. That would be, there's The thing with the oscillating system is that whatever force that you can postulate is negated by the oscillation.
Franklin, can I explain what you're wrong?
Well, then, yeah, how would anything work if every force was negated by its own push-pull? How could anything ever go anywhere, do anything, if every push was immediately undone by a pull? Then you could never even open the door. I mean, it's silly. The whole point is that you can change where the pressure goes. You can take pressure that was going one way and make it go this way, and therefore it's not making a pressure on something else. You can divert the pressure. You can trap the pressure. You can store the pressure like a battery. You can do things with elements of the pressure. Yes, there's 1 trillion pounds of pressure per square meter or something, and we're talking about changes that might only be a few hundred pounds of pressure in that trillion pile. That's the tiny fraction of the electromagnetic radiation that is in the visible light spectrum. But I mean, it's just, who is okay? No, I don't think he's okay. I mean, I think it's kind of silly to argue that every force is doing this, that a photon's doing this. How would it get anywhere if it's doing this? How would it move anywhere if this is what it's doing? Back and forth. If for every step forward, it took a step back, how could it get anywhere? The guy thinks gravity is caused by electro. Yes, well, I think gravity is caused by pretty much the same thing, except it's not a frequency. It's not on a spectrum, but it's exactly the same substance. It's little bits. And the only difference between gravity and light, or the electromagnetic spectrum, is the little bits are at a specific frequency. They're at a specific distance. Gravity is scattered bullets, randomly shot at various distances, all kinds of unevennesses, and the radiation we can perceive comes at very regular pulses, shot very deliberately at the same time. But that's the only difference between light, photons, and gravity. Same force, just a filtering of it. And magnetism is likewise, just a filtering. The red ones go one way, the black ones go the other way. Very simple. So if you're going to say the Who video is bull and you're talking about the guy arguing for that, I'm going to say bullshit. The part where he's wrong is obviously he thinks it's waves, which is retarded. And he thinks the force can interact with the force. He thinks you can push forces around. And you can't push a force. Gravity doesn't come from the inside, so that's some more nonsense. Sorry, it's an external force. It's a push force. There's no gravity comes from the inside. So way off.
Or you're just going to keep on talking
Well,
about
you'd have to go and show me an experiment. That's perfectly something you could experiment on.
Yeah, I just demonstrated to you logically that the perpendicular pressure to the air velocity moving inwards and outwards, and it doesn't, Bernoulli's principle doesn't distinguish whether the air is moving perpendicular to the left or perpendicular to the right. It says if the,
And Bernoulli's principle is about lift on airplanes, which is a whole big pile of crap anyway. But it's just kind of obvious. Yes, if I push a bullet through the air, there's going to be some friction with the medium, but it's all unnecessary. It's all waste. It's all useless. It's all unfunctional. And clearly it will change the pressure on the surfaces as the air is moving, differently, slower than the free air, so to speak. There's drag against the surface, friction.
the air velocity is higher, the pressure is lower. So the pressure perpendicular to the motion of the particles is lower the closer you get to the sound source, because the particles are moving faster. And
Well, I would disagree with that, but if you can show me an experiment that does that, then I'll give that to you. But I'm pretty sure if you did a physical experiment, you'd find no difference.
well, then just do it yourself. Put a speaker out there, put a ball next to the speaker, and turn the speaker on and see if the ball rolls towards the speaker.
I'm pretty sure it won't. It'll just sit there and vibrate.
No, it won't roll towards the speaker. It'll be pushed away. So go ahead and do the experiment, and you'll see it'll go away. Speakers are based on rebound again. Let me think which way they pull. So the magnet pulls one way. Well, it's actually push-pull. It's a solenoid, so it can only go one way technically. And the tension of the fabric pulls it back out again. So it pulls in, pushes out. Pulls in, pushes out, pulls in, pushes out. Yeah, technically, I'd have to think about it for a while. I mean, yeah, you have to do the experiment to find out for sure. The pulling force should be slower than the relaxed force. So the whole point is you're kind of compressing a spring, and the spring has more energy than the pull force. So the pull force is the weak force, the strong force is the rebound. The pull force is the slow movement, the rebound's the quick movement. So it's going to push away.
I'm pretty sure you're wrong.
No, I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm right.
If it's probably friction the surface, and you put it all out there, and you turn the speaker on, a bass speaker on, you vibrate it, you will get the net characteristic of the ball moving towards the speaker.
Hey, Cornelia.
I don't see the point. Let's say whatever it is, one way or the other, it really doesn't matter because again, you're talking about a medium. There's just no evidence of a medium in space. I mean, people keep talking like there's UFOs, even though there's absolutely zero evidence that it exists. None. There's UFOs. Just like they got all that swirly shit going around magnets. You can't find any of it. Can't make an experiment that demonstrates one freaking piece of movement. I can sit there with magnets sitting there forever, and I can try to put smaller and smaller things around it, and I can't get one of them to move on those damn lines in any fucking direction, any friggin' direction. But go ahead, just keep believing it anyway.
This is Carl. I have a question for you.
Good.
It sounds like, from what you're describing, if you put in a very large, powerful speaker in the sky, it would drop the pressure. You could create a tropical depression and it'd be a rain machine.
Oh, man, they just keep going in all kinds of wacky directions. Well, theoretically, if what he's saying is true, you could put a big speaker in the sky and create anti-gravity because you would keep pulling the person back up again. So you could use the air pressure to suck the person back up. But I think he's got the speaker backwards anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, there is the extent of you have friction and heat and randomness in the molecules and everything. You're dealing with an ideal situation, and you're trying to expand this into something that is not even practical to test.
Oh, I agree. It's not practical, not doable, but it sounds like theoretically, based on what you're describing, that could happen.
Well, wouldn't you theoretically think that could happen? I mean, if I could make a speaker the size of like Wyoming and stick it up in the atmosphere and start pumping it, that something would happen to the atmosphere. I mean, that's not very hard to imagine, isn't it? That you could create a tornado or a hurricane that way. Yeah, it's pretty easy to imagine. So I don't know why this guy's, why are these, this conversation is supposed to be about gravity, and they're just lost in this stupid conversation about how molecules of air move.
Well, I don't really want to go into the phenomenal possibilities here. I'm just dealing with the logic of what Bernoulli's principle says.
How molecules of air are pressurized. That is, once you push two together, the pressure wave moves between all the consecutive molecules. So we're not talking about really moving the molecules very far. We're just talking about compressing them. They don't like the compression, so they just keep moving away from the compression. And what's doing that? Oh yeah, the little force bits. That's right. The little gravity bits are pushing them. Oh.
Actually, you cannot deny happening.
The small universe. The small universe is the only universe. We're just emergent properties of the tiny verse. But people don't want to hear that because that means they're robots. I'm not a robot. I have free will from the magical free will thingy.
Part of the velocity of particles. You cannot deny having the Bernoulli's principle holds true.
Well, I think this is a massive overextension of Bernoulli's principle, really, actually an abuse.
But Franklin, there is absolutely no flaw in the logic.
Other than Bernoulli's principle only applies to the large gross flow of medium.
And he's suggesting there's a medium. So that's exactly the point. So why don't you just miss the point entirely? Yes, he's exactly saying that. His crappy argument is exactly consistent. It's crappy, but it's consistent.
But I can't see it as directly applicable to oscillating systems. And when you talk about individual air molecule moving back and forth,
So again, he's saying oscillating systems moving back and forth. The guy doesn't think it moves back and forth.
And it moving back and forth a little bit, and all of these molecules are all moving in unison, so their net observable speed difference, which you would have to have in the Bernoulli's principle, is 0. So
again, just complete nonsense. As if the first cue ball I hit into a cue ball, the force automatically goes to the other end, without any of the chain reactions not necessary. When of course the chain reaction is necessary, and atoms like cue balls are not in a perfect space medium where there's no friction, no damage done to any of the molecules, no ions created in the process. Of course there are, and that slows the process down, degrades it.
I don't see how you can have a lower velocity. You just can't say that lower velocity means lower pressure. I mean, you just can't say that. That's the way overextension of Bernoulli's principle.
Actually, what you just said is wrong anyway, because higher velocity means lower pressure.
Well, in any case, it doesn't matter. There's not going to be any difference in relative velocity.
So he's not even really paying attention to the point, which is he's talking about the pressure perpendicular to the thing moving. So he's talking about some other jerky pressure off the thing moving. That's the Bernoulli part. The guest in the video is an ether guy. They're both ether guys. Shit. What do you think Franklin Who's talking about? Vibrating this is in what do you think it's vibrating in? It's obviously vibrating in his ether. He's an etherist.
In an oscillating system. So therefore, Bernoulli's principle cannot apply.
Yes, it does apply. Because there's nothing in Bernoulli's principle that says that the velocity can't be an oscillating component perpendicular to the pressure being measured.
It's just that every experiment that shows the Bernoulli's principle is not that way.
No, every experiment with the Bernoulli's principle is done in a linear velocity where it's only moving one direction.
Yeah, so I say that's where it applies.
Yeah, and but
well, and the guy already said he thinks they're rays of vibrations. So, I mean, you have to go with what the guy's saying. He's not really arguing his theory. Again, he's just arguing from his point of view, saying, from my theory, your theory is impossible. Fine. You can do that all day, and it's a circle jerk of whatever you want to call it. You're not hitting the target. The target is you have to demonstrate while your theory is better than the conventional theory. If you're arguing each other's theory, you're just not going to get very far.
It does not apply in oscillating systems at all.
All you have to do is differentiate it with time. You take the oscillating system and you take the oscillation away, and you take away any, and you break it down to instantaneous moments in time, like you do with differentiation and integration. And in an instantaneous moment, all the particles are moving outwards, and the particles closer to you are moving outwards at a higher velocity.
The other thing about Bernoulli's principle is that the force has to apply between a region of higher velocity versus lower velocity. And like I said, I don't see any lower velocity region in an oscillating system where everything is oscillating in unison.
One successive wave over the other, one wave next to the other, which waves are down. And the one that's
Oh, can't hear him. So just really poorly done video. They got to up this game a bit. So I guess there's no point. I mean, I think he's going to close it down soon anyway. Well, we just might as well play till the end.
He's closer to you. Both elements are moving faster. The elements that are 10 inches farther from waste. if you extrapolate.
See, I thought they were going to talk about gravity because that's what the first half they were talking about gravity. The guy was explaining his theory. It wasn't very well explained, but the idea was this idea that the Earth absorbs energy and dissipates it. And therefore, that's why you have gravity, because the energy was dissipated. So it was sort of similar to something I would say, but it was only the similarity ended very quickly when he started talking about light moving at various speeds and whatever the other dopey thing was.
Got down to a tenth of an inch, a 16th of an inch, a millionth of an inch. If you extrapolate that down to infinity, particles that are farther out are moving slower because they are in a part of a wave that is in fact spread out more over a large area. So therefore, it's less intense. Less intense means it's moving slower.
Yeah, but moving slower does not necessarily mean you're going to get a pressure differential. If you're going to get a pressure differential, you have to show where that pressure differential is and what direction the force would be. Bernoulli's principle creates a directed vector force. So you can point to it with your finger. So it's like, but you're just saying that the pressure is going to be lower or higher or whatever. And that's not even a net force.
The pressure is lower for the center. You have to basically take every instant in time, measure the pressure instantaneously, and integrate that with every subsequent instant in time.
No, you can't hear. He's talking about integrating it over time and blah, 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 blah. So it's just gibberish, blah, 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 blah.
So you reach the higher wave cycles with the time. Over any singular wave cycle, the pressure of the air towards the source is lower.
Yeah, nobody could really, this is sort of, I watch this stuff because I'm a whore for it, but I mean, it is kind of unlistenable because it's just, the argument just keeps going around and around and around and around. It just doesn't go anywhere.
It requires mathematical integration over time.
Hey, Cornelius, this is Carl again.
Yes.
Like I said before, I understand what you're saying. I get the logic. But could you then have pressure detectors, sensors, okay? One very close to a sound source, another one further away, and another one further away still. Are you saying they would register different pressures?
If they were 6 and
I don't see how you don't already know that. Your eardrum moves less. The further away you go, it's going to move less. Damn.
Excuse me, I couldn't hear that. You're very quiet. Could you say that again, please?
If they were on my cell phone, so that may be part of the difficulty. If they were sensitive enough, I believe so. Now you do, like I said, you do have to deal with the fact that the air molecules are in fact massive, and they do in fact absorb part of the sound wave and translate into that sound wave.
All right, let's just jump ahead, see if it goes anywhere.
You still have objects, and as understanding how it works. I just somebody let the cat out of the bag when I said gravity focuses towards the point to become mass and to become matter, and then matter radiates out.
So gravity focuses to a point to become mass and matter. So this is where the guy just leaves the building. I don't know what the hell he's talking about there. So anyway, enough with the surrender. Too stupid. Yeah, not going to work. Anyway, not going to do me any good anyway. So it had a tiny fraction of a bit of usefulness, but it disappeared quite quickly. So I don't think there's much else. I think I covered what I need to cover. Projects and such. Look at my list of projects. Yeah, so I gotta keep track of my projects. All right, so these are things I do have to work on. And some way to, encourage more participation by people and more questions and answers and more like, well, how do you account for? How do you account for that? And I'm willing to answer those questions and such. I mean, to a point. I mean, I can't account for some stuff that we don't get enough information. I mean, I can't account for their claim that they found the Higgs boson, but yes, just because it would take me 3 months just to figure out what exactly they saw and how what they saw can only be the Higgs boson. I mean, it'd probably take just 3 months to figure out how that argument is even made. But arguments about, interferometry, how exactly does it really work? Can somebody who thinks they know what they're talking about when they say they found a gravity wave, how the machine actually can detect that? How exactly, where the photons are interfering with each other's wave function. Where is that happening? Because the only thing it can really measure is the divergence of the light, and that's it. Can't measure anything else. It's not a bad thing to measure, but I'm just saying it's not going to be it's not nearly the machine they think it is. And such, and other subjects like that. Nobody wants to point out some really good evidence that light is bent by gravity, because I would claim there is no good evidence. A critter under my floor. Go away, critter. They really don't understand. When you say go away, they don't get it. And such. Funny thing is, LIGO is in fact a large Michelson-Morley experiment. Well, again, Michelson-Morley, what's the theory? So yes, obviously it's the same device essentially. I mean, beam splitter, 90-degree angle, mirrors, same experiment. But what's the logic of the experiment? Again, where do the photons turn into a wave function and interfere with themselves? Where do they do that in the experiment? And isn't by quantum mechanics, isn't the rule that it's supposed to be single photons that are interfering with their own wave function, therefore interfering with themselves? We can't make separate photons interfere with each other. We can only make the same photon interfere with itself. See the inconsistency here? I mean, but all of the experiments are inconsistent, because you could argue their radar experiment, if it were truly interference, that experiment is different photons interfering with each other. So somehow the wave function isn't necessary, right? Somehow the individual bits of radar, the radar tons, somehow interfere with each other from separate sources. So they obviously can't be the same photons. They have to be different photons that are interfering, because they're coming from two separate sources. They're not a single photon split in two. There are two antennas shooting. So they have to be different photons. So what's the theory? Is the theory that all photons create a wave function by some magical thing, and every now and then they decide to mix as wave functions? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Well, I think your statement is on its face nonsense. Of course, they're relying on the interference pattern. Of course. It's the whole function of an interferometer. Their whole theory of interferometry is interference. You show me one example of somebody explaining an interferometer where they don't use the word interference. Go ahead, show me. Show me one example. Show me a LIGO page that doesn't have the word interference on it. You do say some bizarre things there, John. I mean, you know, for a guy who seems like he a little bit arrogant about what you know or what physics says or what lecturers know or what this and that and all this stuff, that just seems like a bold statement. I mean, I don't know where you get that from. LIGO does not measure interference. What is it measuring then? How is it measuring the phase change? The phase change caused by a distance change. How does it measure a phase change in the two beams without relying on interference? Well, you can say it measures travel time. I'm just saying that's, in my opinion, that's nonsense. It obviously can't measure travel time. It has to measure it through the interference pattern created by a phase change. It can only measure the phase change. It can't measure the time travel of photons, individual photons. You can't measure their time travel. You can't do it. You can't create a starting line for photons. You can't create a finish line where you can take a picture of them. Can't do that. Not only because of what quantum mechanics says and the fact that the photon doesn't even have a position, but you can't do it because they're too damn fast. So the only way you can tell this phase difference is to see the pattern it creates through interference. LIGO's looking at the pattern. It's not measuring the two beams separately and saying how fast was this beam, how fast was this beam. It's measuring them by smashing the two beams together and seeing them interfere with each other. I would just suggest, John, that you're a little under, your knowledge base on interferometers is a little thin. Okay, so you should just go and see what an interferometer actually does, which is it takes a beam of light, splits it technically in some way, okay, which I don't buy can even be done, but let's just say, and somehow the two beams are equal. So even though one went through a bunch of tiny holes and the other beam reflected off mirrors, the two beams are supposed to be equal, but they're not really equal. But anyway, let's just say, okay, it shoots a beam, separates it, they come back, it gets recombined into one beam. How could you measure the time difference of one beam? Can't do that. The only way they can do that is they look at it and say, look, this part is interfering and this part isn't. That's the only way they can do it. But again, that you're forced to believe then that either two wave functions went through the two arms, or you have to believe that the photons actually went through the two arms, recombined, and then interfered on this leg. And then I can explain why that can't work. Because one of the beams was diverging the whole trip. Yeah, that's why it can't work. The gravity wave makes the perpendicular leg longer. It doesn't matter. We're talking about how they detect the phase change, which is supposed to be the evidence of the longer. See, the longer length means it went another half a phase more than the other light beam. So the frequencies don't match. They're off by a phase change. And the only way they can see the phase change is through the interference pattern. Damn. Why don't you do this on your main channel and have more people involved? Because everybody complained. Everybody just bitched and whined. Oh, you can't do this physics stuff on our misery channel. You know, you can only do miserable stuff on the miserable channel. You can't do any physics. And they all thought I was an asshole and an idiot because they don't know anything about physics. They said, well, Gary, you're smart, but you're not smarter than Einstein. You know, that kind of horse shit. So I put it on a separate channel because they all whined like little babies. Which I don't mind. I mean, I can see the point a little bit. I mean, I made lots of YouTube channels. I mean, I have one on, you know, changing the education system. I have a specific channel for the right to die. I have a specific channel for different subjects because people don't like variety. They like you to do the one thing and that's it. And I'd sort of like that, frankly. I'd rather that Ken Wheeler had a physics channel, well, a metaphysics channel and a camera channel. It'd be much better if he could separate those two, because then I could just ignore all the camera crap that I couldn't give a fuck about. Why do I need to know anything about $5,000 cameras? I ain't going to be buying one. So, especially if I got to pay $10,000 for the fucking lens. Yeah, I ain't buying no fucking camera that's going to cost me $15,000. You know, I buy cameras on eBay for $10. You know, that do 90% of what their shitty $10,000 camera does. You know, so yeah, I wish he'd put his camera shit on one channel and his physics shit on another channel. It would please me. So it's just funny, like this John guy, like I say, he seems reasonably intelligent, but he just bought into all their crap. You know, this whole idea that somehow this gravity wave is a real thing, that it can actually move the Earth, you know, to change the length of the Earth, you know, billions of light years away, and that it turned three solar masses of matter into these bent space waves that aren't real radiation. So it converted matter into a form of radiation Einstein didn't even know existed. You know, and yet they put Einstein's name on it, like, we've proven Einstein right, when Einstein would have been like, you know, if he could dig himself out of the hole he's in, you know, he'd be yelling, you cunts, what do you put my name on that shit for? I never said any of that shit. Okay. You stinkers. Why are you putting my name on that smelly stuff? But I can't build my own Legos. It doesn't matter. We're talking about the theory, for friggin' sake. We're talking about the theory behind the experiment. I did it on my porch, okay? I took a plain piece of glass and I made the interference pattern merely by blowing on it, putting little water molecules on the surface of the glass, and I created the same interference pattern. Damn. The whole concept of a beam splitter is where the big flaw in the whole thing is. Besides the fact of it having different photons interfere with each other, which is another big, huge problem for quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics has no theory for two separate photons interfering with each other. There's no theory for that. It can't possibly work by their own physics, their own theoretical physics. The device can't possibly work. The half-silvered beam splitter that Michelson Morley used is so obviously flawed. The half-silvering creates a bunch of tiny slits. Can you understand that? If I half-silver a mirror, put a bunch of little tiny dots of silver on it, and so it's half see-through and half little dots. Those little dots become a diffraction gradient. They're going to automatically spread the light. So the light that goes through the glass gets spread. The light that reflects off the mirror doesn't get spread. So one beam, while it's bouncing, isn't a spread beam. It doesn't get spread till it goes through the holes between the mirror, and it doesn't do that until the last leg. The last leg is a tiny distance. The arms are huge. The last leg is a little tiny distance. So one beam only gets spread for a tiny, tiny difference And the other leg was spreading the whole time. The 4 miles, it's getting wider and wider and wider because the light is being diffracted by the frickin' slit experiments they're putting it through. They're creating a single slit pattern all over the frickin' place. Obviously not equal beams of light. Huge flaw. And you can understand Michelson Morley making that mistake, but you can't understand them making it now. I mean, Michelson Morley didn't have enough theory to understand how the device worked. But yeah, see, you just mention a subject casually, and there's just there's so many of these subjects, and it's just all this propaganda people have in their head, like somehow they prove something, somehow they've proven it, they settled the question. Light is bent by gravity. No, they haven't. The evidence is insanely weak. It's insanely weak. It's not just a little bit weak. It's insanely weak evidence. And they just talk like, oh yeah, we've proven it. And then the LIGO thing is an abomination to the word proof. It's such thin proof. It's theoretical rubbish. 2 black holes that got there. So just even think about 2 massive black holes. How much energy it takes to move a black hole. So a 60 solar mass black hole and a whatever 42 mass solar mass black hole get caught in. So they weren't born next to each other. No, they flew into each other from somewhere, which is gravitationally impossible because gravity dictates they're going to crash right into each other. So they're breaking the rules right there. They have them going almost half the speed of light, incredible speeds, you know, as they're interacting, which you're saying, how can they acquire that much momentum at that mass? And then what's the next? You know, it's just, I'm just saying, it's just theoretically impossible. You really can't do that. And then they're saying that when they collide, they convert the matter not into light, not into X-rays, not into gamma rays, but into some kind of bent space. Where did anybody theorize that you can convert matter into bent space? It wasn't an Einstein idea. Who invented that idea? Who tested that idea as being reasonable? Nobody. They all have now just accepted. Everybody's accepted that somehow that theory makes sense, that yes, matter can be destroyed and turned into a gravity wave. It's just garbage physics. They can close in on to each other at any angle. I'm saying there's absolutely no physics that will allow you to have 2 bodies that enter a gravitational paradox. So unless the 2 black holes hit something on their way, they will crash into each other. It just doesn't matter which way you make them go, they will crash into each other. There's no way you can enter them into the system because of their high gravity, unless they're going at already, before they get into the system, unless they're already going half the speed of light. So how do you move 60 solar masses the speed of light? What caused it to acquire that much momentum? You have to acquire velocity. You don't get velocity for free. Everything that has any of it had to get it from somewhere. So where did it get the velocity? In a direction. And again, if you just say they were floating in space and then they started feeling each other's gravity and moving towards each other, gravity dictates that they smack right into each other because they don't have any momentum to miss each other with. It's like if you drop something in space, you know, at a certain distance, and you give it no momentum, it will fall into the earth. It won't miss the earth. It'll crash right into it. Orbits are impossible to create without something that slows the object down. So if you come from the outside of the solar system, if you don't hit anything, you'll either hit the sun or you'll fly back out of the solar system forever. Those are the two choices. You hit it or you leave. That's it. There's nothing else you can do because it's conservative force. Whatever you get to, whatever momentum you're given, you'll sacrifice it leaving. You'll lose it. So you go in going three miles an hour. You go into the solar system at 3 miles an hour. You'll leave the other end of the solar system at 3 miles an hour. But the fact is, if you're only going 3 miles an hour, you'll crash into the sun. They move parallel for 1 million year first. Because again, you're just pointing out my own argument. You're saying they're in orbit and somehow their orbit degrades. By what function? They can't be in parallel unless they're essentially their velocity matches the gravitational pull. And again, they never stated it was a binary black hole system. They weren't born in the same system. So exactly how did they do that? Where did they get the velocity, and how did they get in an orbit when orbits are complicated? You just can't drive into an orbit. You can't just come from the outside and go right where the Earth is and get in an orbit, because your velocity will change too much. You'll gain too much speed and you'll crash into the sun. You just can't do it. The sun will give you too much speed. I'm just saying, when things start getting into any kind of loop-de-doo orbit, like they're swinging around each other, when it comes to the end is going to be violent. It's not going to be like they roll around each other and go this and do this and do this for 15 minutes. That kind of crap ain't going to happen unless they hit something. They have to hit other crap to slow them down. If nothing slows them down, they're doing this and then bang. There won't ever be a comet, for example, that, that gets into like a small orbit inside the solar system. Let's say it doesn't hit any planets and it just gets into a small orbit and it's still degrading and degrading and degrading. It just gets closer and closer to the sun. That just won't happen. It'll have an eccentric orbit and it'll eventually just go smash right into the sun. It'll go around 3 times and die. The only place you can survive is if you've got a really wide orbit. Then you're liberated from crashing rules. But as soon as you start getting close, it's going to be over pretty fast. There are vids of just that on YouTube. There's vids of blenders on YouTube where they take a blender and a star field and pretend that actually happened somewhere. The distortion. They say it's a nice simulation. Never been seen in the real universe. All the places that have strong gravity that are creating Einstein rings and doing all this other stuff, somehow they're not doing that to anything else around them. Nothing else is getting touched by the gravity. Just the thing, the one thing. And there's also a real question about a binary system, right? I mean, I could argue that quasars are galaxies, birth of galaxies, that they're binary systems. And the binary system does kind of what you might think it might do, which is it gets weaker, not stronger. The things orbiting each other orbit out, not in. Their velocity ends up being greater than the pull on each other, and they just liberate over time. No, anything else from anybody else or anything else? I mean, LIGO has simulations. I'm just saying that their simulations are overtly, in my opinion, a violation of theoretical physics. So, you can pretend it's just because somebody can draw the picture, it means that it's somehow been tested or that some scrutiny was applied or somebody paid any attention to the rules. When no, they didn't. Well, I don't even know what to make out of this sentence. It just doesn't mean anything. You can walk in the same direction with different speed. I'm saying that you can't do that with orbits. Can't stand out in space holding something and throw it in a lower orbit. Just can't do it. You can only throw it in an orbit that you're at the distance you're at. You can give it velocity and put it in an orbit. Or if you want to put it in a higher orbit or a lower orbit from that position, that distance, you can't do it. You can't throw it into a lower orbit. It's impossible. Whatever you throw this way is going to crash into the sun, and if you throw it that way, it's leaving, probably. Depending on how you throw it, of course. But the point is, if you don't give it enough velocity to leave, it's going around and going to crash right into the sun. The acceleration of the sun makes it impossible. You're adding velocity as you move towards the sun. And the velocity is real momentum. It's real momentum that will be combined to your throwing. So it's just like the baseball argument in a sense. So if I throw a wrench back and forth to another astronaut as we're orbiting the Earth, we know I'm throwing it and he's right over there, and it seems like I'm throwing it right to him. But we know I'm not throwing it right to him. When I'm throwing it, the system, okay, automatically throws the wrench forward. So it gets to where his new position is going to be. So I throw it right at him, and it looks like I threw it right at him. It goes straight to him, but the fact is we're both moving, and the system gave it that extra velocity in the other direction. Now those two velocities have been combined, and it's going that way at a specific velocity. So when I'm sitting in a position in gravity, and I try to throw something into an orbit over there, the fact is the wrench is really going over there. I can't throw it where I tried to throw it. It's not going there. That position will not be where the wrench goes. So the point is you have to combine your velocity with some other thing's velocity to create a new acceleration to get into an orbit. To stay in an orbit, you have to do something to get rid of the extra speed. When they put a satellite in orbit, they do that. They get rid of the extra speed. Once they're in the right place, they change the speed, and then it stays there. So anyway, I guess we're done. So until the next time and such, and so forth and whatnot. Thank you to a point. Yes, it is escape speed. We really weren't talking about escape speed, but whatever. I mean, the escape velocity is a whole different subject. You know, what direction will provide you an escape. But anyway. Yes, I'll just settle for it. That's a different subject. So, till the next time and such, and so forth and whatnot.